Welcome all to this talk about Odoo-Compatible POS hardware. I'll leave you just a few seconds to scan this QR code so you can add all your questions in the pad so we can answer them at the end. Good. So, do you also feel completely lost when we speak about hardware? Well, you're not alone. This is one of the most asked questions I get about. Okay, I'm Hermine Karizopoulos. I'm a retail expert here at Odoo, and I'm going to answer all those questions for you so you can have the good guidelines to actually help you choose the hardware that will work for you. So, let's demystify POS hardware. What is it all about? So, when we speak about compatible POS hardware, what is it? Actually, it's all about integration. So when you choose a compatible hardware, this will mean that the information will directly flow from Odoo to the specific hardware that you will choose. Now, what are the advantages of having this integrated hardware? Well, it will ensure seamless and automated processes, and it will also help you minimize errors. Now, let's take a simple example of integration so you get the idea behind that. So let's take the POS and the payment terminals. So here is how it works. So that's the example of integration. Of course, you can also use this hardware without. I'm going to explain that just after. So when you have a POS order transaction, you will actually send the payment request, and the payment request is going to go automatically on the payment terminal. So the amount is going to be sent to the payment terminal without any manual encoding of the cashier. Now, the payment terminal is actually going to validate the transaction or actually refuse it. Okay, so it's going to do the payment authorization. So if the payment provider accepts the transaction, then automatically this info is sent to the POS of Odoo, and the order is going to be validated or refused accordingly, depending on this payment authorization. Now, that's when you have the integration. When you don't have the integration, it's totally possible to use the hardware that you have, but in this case, you will need to have manual encoding. So indeed, do you always need integration? Actually, you do not. As I said, manual encoding is totally possible, but of course it will depend on your business as well. So here are a few guidelines to help you through it if you need integration or if you don't. So it will depend, of course, on the transactions volumes that you have. If you have high transactions volumes, let's take sales during in a retail shop. So if you have a lot of them, then I would indeed recommend you take the integration. If, on the other hand, you have low transactions volume, well, maybe it's not interesting to have that. Then we also have the frequency of operation. So let's take the example of printing price labels to actually put on your products. If you do the operation once a month, then I wouldn't advise you to take the integration. If you do it daily, then it would be interesting to actually take the integration, as it will help you automate the process and help you win time as well. So it also depends on the business you operate in. If you're actually afraid to have a lot of errors, then in this case, I would also advise to take the integration. So here, what you can see is that depending on the business you work in, depending on the frequency and depending on the transaction volumes, you may or may not go for the integration. So let's start exploring the IoT. The IoT is a subject that's really misunderstood. Let me give you a few principles so you can have a better idea of when to use it and when not, and what you can actually do with it. So what is the IoT? Basically, it's a device on which we run Odoo code that will enable the connection between Odoo and the hardware when they're not able to communicate natively. This is a technical constraint, so I'll get a bit deeper into that. So indeed, like we said, you have the Odoo server and the hardware. So let's take a printer. When they cannot communicate, you indeed need this intermediary from which the information flow is going to pass through. So one of the biggest misconceptions I get is that the IoT is a magical device where you can just plug any hardware when it's not going to work directly. This is completely false. It's not the case. Actually here, when we speak about the IoT, our developers need to create the specific drivers on the device so it can communicate with the hardware. Okay, so this is very important to understand. I'm going to go through the whole list of hardware that needs IoT, the one that doesn't, so rest assured you will get a good idea about that. So indeed, like I said, on the hardware that for which we have actually the integration, as we have to have the drivers and the technicalities to work. So do I always need an IoT? Well, here it's the same as for the integrated hardware. Again, it will depend if you actually don't want to do the manual encoding. So the answer is no, you do not always need an IoT. Can I work without? Absolutely. Here again is the same principle. You can definitely work without the IoT, but here manual encoding will be required. So in which cases do we need the IoT? So basically, like I said, when we have non-compatible communication protocols, the IoT will enable the communication between Odoo and the devices. But we have a second application as well. If you want to automate printing, so I took the example of the printing labels, then you would need the IoT. So what this is going to do, you will be able in Odoo to actually link a report with a specific printer, so you don't need to download actually the report every time, open the PDF and then choose a printer. Here it will directly send the report to the printer you've selected thanks to the IoT. Now we have actually two forms of IoTs. We have the physical and we have the virtual. So the physical IoT is basically a physical device. It's a Raspberry Pi on which we are going to run Odoo code. So we need to flash an SD card for it to actually work. Then we have the virtual IoT since Odoo 16, which is actually a software on which Odoo code is running, but it's only available on Windows computers. Now, if you want to learn more about the IoT, I would advise you to go and see the talk of Rabin Heinz. If I'm not mistaken, just after mine, he's going to discuss the principle of IoT further. Good. So let's get into the hardware now that we have the principles. So let's discuss first the screens. So when I speak about POS screens here, what I am speaking about is actually the screen that the cashier is going to see. So the screen for which he's going to take the order of the client. So it's basically where we are going to open the POS front end of Odoo. Now here, all screens are actually compatible. Those are direct devices. So any computer, laptop, mobile device, or touchscreen is going to work. Okay. The only thing that you need to have in mind here is that you need to be able to run a web browser so you can open the database and work with the POS of Odoo. Now, since Odoo 18, we have the PWA mode. This is actually great. It's not an application, but you still need the web browser for it to work. But basically, it's going to give you the look and feel of an application. The screens are going to be optimized. Let me show you how it's going to look. So here you have an example of the PWA. So it's a screen here in the point of sales application. Now I have here the POS front end from Odoo and also the logging screen, and you see we don't have any links. And what's really nice is that you can actually add the Odoo icon in your bar at the top of your computer, and you can very easily open it. But yet again, you need the web browsers for it to work. Good, let's talk about preparation displays. So what are preparation displays? We have actually first the preparation displays. That's actually the dematerialized version of the kitchen orders. And you will have a digitalized version right here, where the kitchen is going to receive all the orders from the restaurant. Then you have the customer display. That's actually the screen that the customer is going to see when he orders food that he needs to take and pick up at a pickup zone. Good. So about those application, those screens, what you need to know here is that it's going to be a direct device as well, as long as you can open it actually on a web browser. Okay, so that's a version on which you will open Odoo and open then the preparation display. And then you could also have another way of connecting that is by having a second screen. And in this case, you would need an HDMI cable or a USB-C connected device. Good, then we have the customer display. So the customer display is the display a customer is going to see at the shop where he can actually see the summary of his order. So that's an example here of a customer display. What you need to know here as well is that as long as you can again open the device with a web browser, it's going to be accessible. Here again, you can connect a second device, and then the same principle applies. You need to have a HDMI connection or a USB-C connected device. Now, if you don't have those available ports, if you are working with a tablet, for instance, and you don't have enough ports to connect that this way, then you might need an IoT box. So you can also connect the second customer display based on a link, but then again, you would need a web browser to do so. So we have here the kiosk. So the kiosk, you might have seen it here at our bars. You can actually test it, so don't hesitate to do so. Here again, it would be a direct device as long as any kiosk actually can run a web app. So it's basically a touch screen. There you don't have really much difference as well. Now, what you do need to know here is that you could do the setup, for instance, on an Android box. But here, if you want to connect terminals, you need to have integrated payment terminals. So either ADN, Stripe, or Raspberry Pi, but we only support today these integrations. So since Odoo 18, what's really nice is that you can actually set up the kiosk way easier with the IoT. So in this case, the IoT is going to just help you set up this much easier. Good. So let's jump now into the compatible hardware. So we have the topic of receipt printers. So what you need to know here is that you have three protocols to know, okay? If you want to go for a direct device, we work with apps and printers, and as long as it follows the ePOS SDK for JavaScript protocol, it's going to work without an IoT. Now, just pay attention to the connection mode. You need to have an Ethernet connection. If you have a USB connection, then you will require to have an IoT, even though if it follows the ePOS communication protocol. Now, if you go for the ESC POS or STAR protocol, there you can of course have those devices, but you wouldn't require an IoT to make the connection possible. So here again, you also need to take a network connection, but you can also take a USB one. So what is going to happen if you have compatible receipt printers? Basically, the printing of receipts is going to be automatic once the order is validated. That's an option you can either keep or activate or deactivate, depending on your needs. Then we have cache drawers. So cache drawers, so basically you can take any cache drawer you want as long as it can be connected with a compatible receipt printer. So that's really easy. We recommend actually the Metaspace key 2, but if you can connect it with the printer, it doesn't really matter which one. But it needs to be a compatible receipt printer. Keep that in mind. So here, when the receipt is going to print, the cache drawer is going to open automatically. If you need to do a cache in, cache out, then of course you will also be able to open that one. So let's move to barcode scanners. So here it's quite simple. You will have a direct device. So if you can have a device that is going to be connected via Bluetooth or USB, then indeed you will be able to use it as such. So we recommend Honeywell or Netum, but any device that's going with USB or Bluetooth is going to work. Now, if you're, for instance, working with a tablet where you don't have the Bluetooth and you don't have the ports to connect it with a USB, then indeed you might require to have an IoT box. So just know that since this version, you will be able to actually use the camera of your device. So if you don't have a scanner, you can actually use the camera of your tablet, for instance. So let's move to the topic of payment terminals. That's actually a bit complicated to understand, but I will give you the guidelines so you can choose wisely. So what you need to know here is that having integrations, a compatible payment terminal is actually an integration. So you really need to choose, if you want an integrated payment terminal, one of the available providers that we have here. So you need to take Adyen, Stripe, Worldline, Ingenico, Viva Wallet, Razorpay, Paytm, Ventiv, or Mercado Pago, depending on, of course, the commissions that you will hand, you will manage with the provider. Now, for payment terminals, you do need to have you have some attention points you need to take into account. So, like I said, you need to take an integrated provider if you want the integration. Okay. If you don't, then you can manually encode on the payment terminal the amount and validate the order manually. So one of the providers I showed you, but you also need to take into account the countries in which the integration is available. Okay, for Worldline, for instance, we have an integration, but it's only available with in the Benelux. So be very attentive to that as well, and read the documentation wisely before choosing. You also need to have models of terminals that you need to take into account. If I again take the example of Worldline, you need to have to work with Yomani or Yoximo terminals. And then, depending on the integration, you will need an IoT or not. And the last point of attention is the version of Odoo. So you need to know if, for instance, your payment provider is available in the version in which you operate. So like I explained at the beginning, the integration is going to send automatically the amount on the payment terminal, and then it's going to automatically validate or refuse the order depending on the payment authorization. Now here's an overview of the direct devices and the devices that do need an IoT box. So you have Adyen, Stripe, Viva Wallet, Razorpay, Mercado Pago, and Paytm that work without an IoT. But you have Worldline, Ingenico, Six, and Ventiv that do require the IoT. Now, here we have a specificity. If you do need an IoT with the payment terminals, you need to have one IoT per payment terminal. This is a technical constraint. The path that we use to communicate needs to be exclusive, and so that's the reason why you would need one IoT per payment terminal. Let's move to scales. So scales actually always require an IoT. So we are integrated with Metler Toledo scale. So all the scales of Metler Toledo should work. We also have a stand here from Metler Toledo. Don't hesitate to go and see the scales that they propose. And here indeed you do need the IoT. Now, what is this integration going to do? So when you weight your products on the scales, the weights are directly going to be available into the POS of Odoo, so the cashier doesn't need to do any manual encoding. Now, since 17.4, what's very interesting to note is that tar management is available, so you can also use that. And what you should also know is that some European countries actually need a scale certification. We're not yet there, but it's underway, and we're actually making sure that we are. Good. Label printers. So those are the printers you can use to print product prices. Now here, like I said, you do not need an IoT for that, but it is recommended. Why? Because you will be able to automate the printing of your labels. So you can totally use it without, as long as it is a ZPL protocol. It's going to work with it Odoo, and you can also print in PDF. But having the IoT is going to actually make sure you can link the report with a printer and that you don't need to download the file, open it, and choose a printer each time. It just sends the information to the printer you have linked. So like I said, indeed, automated printing with the IoT. So then we have RFID tags. So those are quite handy when you work with a lot of cashiers that actually switch a lot during shifts. What you can actually do is a direct device, so no IT required here. You can buy these RFID tags. It's going to have a code on it that you can scan. And basically, by configuring those tags on your employee form, instead of entering a PIN code each time, employees can just select their name, scan the RFID tag, and log into the point of sale. So it's going to enable you to have easy switching between employees. And we have a new feature as well where you can just identify yourself by scanning this tag. You don't even need to identify the employee in question. So what's really interesting to hear here is that it actually works as barcodes. It's just a number that the tag is going to read. So indeed, easy switching of cashiers in the POS. We also have electronic product labels. So here, the idea is to automate the change of prices. If your prices change quite often, then it would be a nice integration to think about having. So here, it's a direct device, so you do not need an IT, but of course, you would need to buy every the product labels and the transmitter that goes with it. So we work with Pricer, and what this is going to do is going to automatically update your prices once a day, or actually when you demand it. So indeed, in Odoo 18, we have some new features. So you will be able to display stock. You can actually have ribbons to indicate that it's a sale, for instance, promotions, and also you will be able to integrate this with price lists. And we also have made it easier to do the pairing between the labels and actually your Odoo database. So we have the black box in Belgium. So that's actually a legal restriction for bars and restaurants. So they need to have a black box to comply to fiscal regulations. Now here what you need to know is that you do need an IoT box. You also absolutely need a receipt printer. This is really important. And we are integrated with Boîte Noire. So you need to have a black box coming from Boîte Noire. And for instance, we are certified on version 15, 16, 17, 17.2, 70.4, and 18 is underway. So everything that was discussed here, you might ask, where can I actually find that? If you go here on the Odoo Plus hardware page of Odoo, so you can just encode that on Google and you will find the page. All the different directives I gave you are there. You can also access the documentation, so you can have a pretty good idea of what works with Odoo and what doesn't work. Thank you very much. If you have questions, you can scan the pad here and we can answer them together. Non, j'ai pas mangé ça avec. Okay.
Thank you for that talk, Elmin. So I have a couple of questions. So how can we protect IoT in the network?
Well, that's a very good question, but it's also a very technical one. So I would suggest maybe you can go and see the talk of Robin over the IoT, or you can come at the booth and talk with our technical experts to discuss this.
The talk of Robin will be just after this one. Is Kiosk compatible with Blackbox?
Today, Kiosk is not compatible with Blackbox, but this is a future improvement we're going to tackle.
What about fiscal printers? Do they need IoT boxes?
If I recall correctly, the fiscal printers will need one, but this is a point I would need to check. You can come at the booth and we can discuss this.
Is the application Viva Wallet is compatible without a terminal?
Absolutely. VivaWallet is actually compatible with the NFC technology, so you can actually use it with a phone that has this technology. You absolutely do not need a terminal to use VivaWallet.
How many device can we connect to one IoT box?
Okay, so this is actually a question that will depend if it's a physical IoT or virtual. But basically, all the devices that are in the network are going to be detected by the IoT as long as the IoT is also in the same network. So this is one very important principle you need to understand about IoT. It's network. You really need to be in the same network. So all the devices with an Ethernet or Wi-Fi connection are going to be detected. Now, if you need to plug a device directly on the IoT, like the scales, for instance, well, there you will need to have as many IoTs as the devices that you need to. I mean, you have some ports on the IoT, and you can actually plug the devices depending on the available port. You also have the constraint, the physical constraint. So if your hardware is really far away and you need to physically plug it, you might also need a second one. And like I said, for payment terminals, you need one IoT per payment terminal when the payment terminal requires the IoT.
Thank you. Is the performance of the virtual IoT box is the same as the physical one?
I'm not sure what you mean about performance, but they're quite alike, but you still need to know a few things with the virtual IoT. Robin is really going to explain very well when to use the physical IoT or the virtual one. But basically, the best scenario is when you have one virtual IoT on one computer communicated with hardware, and that you have, if you have a second computer, the ideal way would be to install also the virtual IoT on that device, so it will communicate with its hardware. But the case where the second computer is going to communicate with the hardware is not the ideal one.
Thank you. The time is up for now, so thank you, Hermine.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, everyone.